Yes, very soon we'll all be saying the juice is loose as O.J. Simpson is granted parole. Meanwhile, Hugh Freeze loose from a job and a big fat paycheck from Ole Miss for just one call to an escort service, apparently. And some teens that went missing in the United States from the country of Burundi may have been found wandering into Canada. We'll talk about that and other stories for yesterday's conversations. This is the 21st of July. That makes this the Daily Recap Podcast for July 21st, 2017. Welcome to the podcast. My name is Jay Coogan Payne. I'm your host for this podcast, the Daily Recap Podcast from ThisIsAConversation.com. We here at This Is Conversation go through all day long, sending out tweets and Facebook links and, of course, links at our website, ThisIsAConversation.com, to various stories from various sources across the day. Things that are interesting, things that are trending, things that are really, really hot, and some things that are just so out there that we just want to see how you react to it. And you react to it very well, very positively, and if you don't react positively, then we back away from it. You can be a part of the conversations by just following us on social media. th_conversation is how you find us on Twitter. Find us on Facebook at This Is a Conversation, and of course, the main website, react there as well, ThisIsAConversation.com. Now, on a day where I was very giddy about stories about monkeys roaming wild in the state of Florida, a hunter in Alabama shooting down an 820-pound wild hog that was just wandering in his front yard, and yes, a man who was shooting at tires of an AT&T worker truck because the truck parked on his lawn. Those aren't the stories we're actually going to get into in the podcast. We had even bigger fish to fry all day yesterday, so that's all we're saying about those. Let's get on to the big ones for the day. We start off with a story that developed into a very weird story along the way. Some Burundi robotics team's teenagers went missing from a competition in D.C. They were in the country for a competition for robotics in Washington, D.C., in the nation's capital. And the day before, they just went missing. No one could find the 6 teens from Burundi, and it was something that was becoming a bit of a firestorm across the nation, wondering what could happen to 6 random kids from an outside country. There was no real suspicion of what could have happened. Actually, no one had any idea what was going on and what was happening. Burundi, not exactly one of the greatest countries in the world, but these kids finding a way here to D.C. to compete in this competition and then going missing from the competition. Meanwhile, later in the day, video surveillance found pictures of at least 2 members of the missing team going into Canada, crossing over the border. So at this point, we're not sure exactly where they are. We assume they are in Canada, doing whatever it is that they're doing, escaping the D.C. area, escaping Burundi, whatever. We're not exactly sure. But that's a story that developed into something really even stranger. Hopefully we'll have more details on that throughout the weekend. Now, are you still playing Pokemon Go? If you are, the wait is over. The wait that you've been being patient for, the thing you've been holding out for, legendary Pokemon are coming to Pokemon Go very soon. Soon you can get that whatever it is, or the what's it call it, or the who's it, whatever. You and your gang of Pokemon gym runners can go around wandering in people's yards again, looking for legendary Pokemon, the big guns, the big ones that are stars of the major movies, and not just Bulbasaurs and whatever those things are anymore. Meanwhile, a very sad ending, 2 on the way, actually. Number one, this is a sad ending to a story that's been developing. Ex-Bills wide receiver James Hardy, who was found dead, basically floated out of the water of a lake a river a few weeks ago, essentially ruled as a suicide. His death was ruled as a suicide by the coroner. He essentially jumped into the river, killing himself, and then, of course, washed up weeks later. His family could not find him for all that time, and now we have a resolution. His family has some closure, and, of course, obviously they have a body to bury and lay to rest for the whole thing. Another suicide, another really weird one happening on this one. Oddly enough, on the birthday of Chris Cornell, one of his best friends, Chester Bennington, singer from Linkin Park, who actually sang at Chris Cornell's funeral service, killed himself by hanging yesterday as well. Another suicide from another person who apparently dealing with mental health issues, and a fairly famous person who just could not find a way to escape whatever demons were going there. Our thoughts and prayers go out to the family of both Chester Bennington and James Hardy. And, of course, we also want to remind you that mental health is a serious problem. It's a serious issue. If you're having issues dealing with depression or loneliness or excessive sadness or just not feeling well, the best thing you can do is to reach out to someone and talk to someone about it, even if it feels like that's the last thing you want to do. I have dealt with depression and dealt with mental illness myself personally. Stepping up to the plate and admitting that you have a problem in this case and getting some help, even though sometimes getting the help is really painful, a very painful process, is a major step and makes you a true hero by all measures of the word. So if you're having issues with loneliness, with sadness, with depression, being down in the dumps, that's a little too low, been there a little too long, make sure you reach out to someone and try to get things turned back around. In the meantime, on to happier news, you could say. If you're a fan of American Idol, or specifically the whole karaoke contest that the show became, then you know it's coming back. You know it's being revived on a different network, ABC, but you know the familiar face of Ryan Seacrest being out is back in. Ryan Seacrest making an announcement on his new daytime gig, which is Live with Kelly and Ryan, saying that, yes, he has officially signed on to be the guy who goes to commercial break and interviews people and just stands there and smiles on American Idol, the revival of American Idol happening on ABC very soon. Simon Cowell apparently will be involved because he is. Whether some of the original cast will be back there or they'll find another new batch of singers to evaluate the talent, we shall soon see. O.J. Simpson, what was the biggest story of the day for most of the day, essentially people waiting for this day for a long time, 9 years specifically for his jail term here. And what happened was essentially the same thing that happened the last time he was on trial. Everybody watched it on TV. It was a big ratings bonanza if you had a TV station, or now if you had a streaming service to watch the O.J. Simpson trial, which was basically just a short hearing, a couple words being said, a little bit of gruff behavior by O.J., by the way, between him and one of the members of the parole board. But when it was all said and done, he got 4 thumbs up, the final word. He will be paroled starting when his first availability to get out is, which is October the 1st. So only then can you officially say the juice is loose. Right now, the juice is just, a little getting warmed up, getting started. He's not quite out there yet. But based on the full terms of his parole, whether he gets out of Nevada, whether he gets to hang out back in Florida, and whether he tries to make a little extra money being OJ, and that gets pulled in by the Goldmans, who he still owes a lot of money to, that's going to be all said and done down the line. But O.J. Simpson coming to a golf course maybe near you fairly soon. And the big story that turned into the big story of the day was Hugh Freeze. Now, if you're not a college football fan or don't live in the South, the name may not sound familiar, but he's a pretty big name here in Arkansas. Hugh Freeze was once a coach to one of the second-tier schools here in the state, Arkansas State. He took that school to an amazing feat, going to bowl games every year and bringing it up to almost the level of the top-tier school, the University of Arkansas. He gets a big shot job with the SEC, the same conference as Arkansas, going to Ole Miss. Oddly enough, taking over the job from a guy who used to coach at Arkansas, Houston Nutt, who had some issues in Arkansas and had some issues leaving Ole Miss. There's the build-up to all the drama and why it means a lot. Here's what went down and why it got really, really ugly. Now, Houston Nutt was once the coach for Ole Miss, and he was dismissed and was replaced by Hugh Freeze. In the process, there were some words being said and some things being done and some issues on the way the program was run that Hugh Freeze is now dealing with, essentially saying that things weren't on the up and up for the football program. Hugh Freeze is basically in the saddle for that, but he kind of tossed the shovel back towards Houston Nutt, saying this whole thing sort of started as Nutt was leaving, and he was basically building the bad culture. Hugh Freeze, was just trying to work out through it and get to the other side. Because of words like that, Houston Nutt believes he's having issues getting new jobs in coaching and, of course, just being slandered in general. So he sued the university for slander. And he had his lawyer say, oh, by the way, we need to see Hugh Freeze's phone records for this week way back when. And after seeing the phone records, he had the lawyer say something like, there may be some embarrassing things about the university that these phone records may point out that we might not want to bring to light. So we might want to settle this case. That case is still actually pending. There's still things pending as in sanctions for the football team and what they're going to do with their sanctions. But Hugh Freeze, on a totally separate matter, is no longer the coach at the University of Mississippi, or Ole Miss, as it's called. Now, what exactly happened? Well, Hugh Freeze, or I should say the university, offered up the phone records to the lawyer because it's a school-issued phone, so they had to. Hugh Freeze was able to scratch out some family and personal-related calls, but in the family and personal-related calls he did not scratch out. There was one call for 1 minute that went to an escort service that had no audio. It was dropped because it was assumed that it was a bad dial, a butt dial, or misdial or something. A little extra investigation found out that Hugh Freeze is actually frequently calling escort service between the company phone and his personal phone. Found that comes down to conduct unbecoming of the university, essentially embarrassing the university. And with that, Hugh Freeze no longer has a job. And with that, he doesn't get his buyout or any sort of severance. He is cut completely at this immediate time. They've done all the shuffling they need to do to get ready for football, which is happening in about 2 weeks here in college football, and the first game coming up in about a month and a half. So right at the time where the coaches are getting ready to get into the gig. In fact, Hugh Freeze just a week and a half ago speaking at the SEC Media Days about getting past all the distractions of the sanctions. Of course, doesn't have to deal with that anymore because it is no longer his job. Whether he'll land on his feet at a new job anytime soon, who'll know? You can ask Bobby Petrino, who, of course, took over for Houston Nutt at Arkansas, who had his own little extracurricular affairs dealing with the school and his personal life that shouldn't have mixed in a weird way. Of course, ending up with him busting his face open over a motorcycle. That's a long story we'll get into some other day. If you don't know that one, oh, baby, that's a good one. But it's the oddity of a phone call and phone records, which essentially got Houston Nutt fired from here at the University of Arkansas, that he used as a weapon to get the coach that replaced him in Ole Miss. You think the old-time soap operas are amazing. You should really get into deep down college football. It is pretty darn scandalous. But those are all the stories that we are going to highlight for yesterday. We had plenty of things going on. Like I said, I couldn't get to the guy that shot the pig in his front yard. That was an awesome story, but couldn't get to that one on today. We have plenty of great things we're expecting going on for this Friday, and we'll talk about this Friday, this Saturday, and this Sunday on Monday morning's edition of the podcast. We will recap the whole weekend on Monday's Daily Recap podcast. So we take a little time off for the weekend to just kind of gig what's going back and forth, and we will, of course, keep an eye on it and keep score, and you guys will, of course, interact with us by using your power of the internet. We're responding to the stories on Twitter, on Facebook, at the website, th_conversation on Twitter, and, of course, Facebook, we are This Is the Conversation. Now, coming up later in the day, we will start our taping for tomorrow's program, which will be the weekly wrap-up podcast. We will get into the top 10 stories of the week, and we'll tell you which ones that you really, really loved. And then from there, we hope to have a second batch of interviews with, this week should be Daryl McCullough from the Full Circle podcast. We're scheduled to have that appear. He will play the brackets and get to talk about some stories based on the unfair advantage of picking one over the other. And then we'll get into the stories that didn't quite make the top 10, but we still think are pretty cool. And I may sneak in that guy shooting that pig in the front yard in that story. I really, really, really want to talk about that one. We'll see if I have time for that. In the meantime, just keep on doing what you're doing, because that makes you awesome and keeps us going as well. Follow us on social media, th_conversation on Twitter. This is the Conversation on Facebook. And, of course, the main website, thisisaconversation.com. Share, review, rate the podcast wherever you get it from. We seem to be leaning towards an Android world and leaning well towards mobile. About 98% of the people who get this podcast are listening on their mobile device, which is awesome, or tablet as well. So they tend to be Android users, but we love the Apple folks. We love Apple Podcasts. We love iTunes. Give us rating reviews in iTunes. It's still the major player, the master of all things for reviews and pushing out the knowledge of podcasts. But if you get us on Google Play, if you get us on Stitcher, if you get us on Spreaker, we have a lot of people who have us tuned in on iHeartRadio. If you get us there, leave a rating and review so more folks can say what's going on, get more people in. Share it with his friend, share it with an enemy, share it with complete strangers. Just share, because sharing is caring. And for more information about other projects I have going on, you can check me out at jclevelandpayne.net. Thank you for being who you are. The best people out there who are totally into real world events and real things going on and don't get sucked into hours of staring at TV watching OJ. Well, of course, maybe you do, because that's what I did. But you do like to get into the other stories and not get stuck in the breaking news cycle that gets stuck on TV. Thank you for having interest in other things out there and letting us know which ones are very important to talk about. We'll do that again. Of course, the daily version back on Monday. Weekly wrap-up happening tomorrow. Tune in for those. Thank you so much for being a part of the crew with This Is